we are continuing our conversation about the battleground state of Wisconsin with Mordecai Lee. He's Professor Emeritus at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Professor, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mimi.
So your take, Professor, on the state of the presidential race right now in Wisconsin?
Well, in one respect, as a professor, it's fun to live in a battleground state. It's almost like a privilege. There are people who live in 43 states who are getting nada, and we in these 7 states are getting a lot of love. And it's so political and so politicized that just the other day when I was watching a newscast on a commercial station, and they broke for a commercial, I'm used to seeing sort of a political ad here and there, but in this case, every single ad in the commercial break was political, either president or it was for the U.S. Senate race. And my jaw dropped. I'd never seen so much political advertising. And I have to tell you, some of these ads are just brutal in their attacks. Again, I've never seen it. So as a professor, I'm finding this interesting. But as a private citizen, a resident of Wisconsin, I have to tell you, it's awful. I can't wait until this election is over. And people I talk to here in Milwaukee, they all say the same thing. They want it to be over.
Professor, I wonder, in addition to the ads, there's a lot of visits by the candidates. Have you gotten a chance to go to a rally or go meet a candidate face to face?
There are a lot of visits. I haven't gone to any of the events. I'm starting to see a trend in the in-person visits, and that's that, for example, this week that we're experiencing, I think it's 4 events from the Harris campaign, and so far only 1 event announced by the Trump campaign. It was by Senator Vance on Sunday. Now, it's early in the week. They do a lot of last-minute scheduling, but to me, that strikes me as a little sort of off balance. And just 2 weeks ago, there was a similar off balance. And I'm wondering, this has to be only a guess, if they've decided to sort of bomb Pennsylvania and North Carolina so much that they're willing to let Wisconsin slide. Now, it's possible that the Trump campaign has fewer visits for any number of reasons, but one possibility is that in their internal polling they think they've got Wisconsin. It could be the opposite example, that it's so close they figure they might lose it. We're only 10 electoral votes. Maybe they'd rather have their candidates spend more time in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. But something odd is going on. I don't know quite what it is, but it might be meaningful.
Well, I want to.
Mimi,
go right ahead.
May I say one more thing? I'm not experiencing much door knocking. I'm getting a little bit in the mail, but I'll tell you what is really awful: the messages I'm getting on text and instant messaging. I probably get 10 to 15 a day, asking me to vote, telling me to vote, telling me how to vote. Sometimes you can tell from the name of the organization if it leans left or leans right. Sometimes you can't. I'm getting a ton of so-called surveys, all of which I suspect are really camouflaged. But I sometimes have to turn off my phone because it's just too much texting.
Well, speaking of visits by the candidates, I want to show a portion of J.D. Vance's visit to Wisconsin, where he talked about issues of faith and Christianity, and then I'll have you respond to it.
Now, I want to talk particularly to people of faith, because I know we've got a lot of Catholics here. And, I don't talk a whole lot about my faith because, sometimes you just talk about other things. You talk about public policy, but I'm certainly a very devout Christian. And I was actually baptized for the first time in 2019. I returned to my faith as a young man. Got baptized. And I say this as a Christian, as a person who was baptized for the first time just a few years ago. There is something really bizarre with Kamala Harris's anti-Christian rhetoric and anti-Christian approach to public policy. I don't think that we've, that's right, Jesus is king, and I don't think that we've seen... don't think that we've seen anything like this in modern American politics. You saw this video that Gretchen Whitmer, we know Gretchen Whitmer is, she's the governor of Michigan. That's right, I agree. But Gretchen Whitmer does this really bizarre thing where she acts like she's given somebody communion, but it's a Dorito. And of course, Gretchen Whitmer isn't like a minister of anything, except for, a church I don't necessarily want to talk about. But think about how sacrilegious that is. And think about how offensive that is to every person. Frankly, whether you're a person of Christian faith or not, Donald Trump and I are going to fight for your right to live your values, because that's what the First Amendment protects.
Professor Lee, your comment on that, the religious makeup maybe of Wisconsin, and also the other things that he said.
Well, I think this is what we would expect in conventional politics. In other words, winning an election, you do it by addition, not subtraction. And so here what he's doing is he's trying to add more Catholics to be Trump voters and Trump supporters. And you're right, Mimi, based on the demography of Wisconsin, we have an above average percentage of Catholics compared to some other states. I don't know the latest statistics. I'd guess it's probably about 30 to 40%. Now, that's a ton of voters, and they have a lot of other polls and directions that could influence who they decide to vote for. But Wisconsin was a good place for him to talk about the Catholic vote.
If you'd like to join our conversation with Mordecai Lee, he's Professor Emeritus at Wisconsin-Milwaukee University. The numbers are Republicans 202-748-8001, Democrats 202-748-8000, Independents 202-748-8002. We also have that line set aside for Wisconsin residents. That number is 202-748-8003, and that's the same line that you can use to text us. You can also post on social media. Well, Professor, I want to show you an ad that the DNC is running in battleground states, including Wisconsin, attacking Green Party candidate Jill Stein, calling her a spoiler. Here it is.
Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president. So why are Trump's close allies helping her? Stein was key to Trump's 2016 wins in battleground states. She's not sorry she helped Trump win. That's why a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump.
Jill Stein, I like her very much. You know why? She takes 100% from them.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Is that true, Professor? Would any Jill Stein voters in Wisconsin be coming from potential Harris supporters? What do you think of that?
Mimi, I have to tell you that I have not seen that ad on my TV. Now, it's presumably in rotation. Maybe it's not in high rotation. Maybe they have an assessment of the Wisconsin voter in terms of Stein that perhaps they're not as concerned about Stein in Wisconsin as the 6 other battleground states. But the political logic of the ad is true, and it definitely is true for Wisconsin that 8 years ago, I think it's fair to say that Stein being on the ballot and getting, it was about 2 to 3% of the vote, that had she not been on the ballot and had most of those votes gone to Hillary Clinton, that Clinton would have won Wisconsin instead of Trump. After all, Trump won Wisconsin 8 years ago by about 23,000 votes out of more than 3 million votes cast. So the scenario could happen again. I'm guessing that their overnight polling that they're doing in Wisconsin is perhaps telling them that Stein is not as big a factor as perhaps she was 8 years ago in Wisconsin, or as she perhaps is and continues to be in the other 6 battleground states.
I want to ask you about a House race in Wisconsin. This is the 3rd district in the western part of the state. The incumbent is the GOP Representative Derek Van Order, and a close ally of President Trump. He is being challenged by Democrat Republican Rebecca Cook. What do you know about that race and how that might turn out?
That's western Wisconsin for people who know La Crosse on the Mississippi. It should be a competitive race. I think you would presume that an incumbent would have an advantage, and I think in most categorizations it's listed as leaning Republican but possibly Democratic. What they're fighting over essentially is the undecided vote and the independent vote. And Mimi, maybe it's a really important detail at this point to mention that in Wisconsin we do not have voting registration by partisanship. In other words, when you register to vote, whether during normal times or on election day, nobody says to you, are you registering as a Democrat or as a Republican or as an independent? And so that makes it harder to guess how the vote is going, especially based on the ballots, the mailed ballots that are coming in, or now the in-person voting based on a person's partisan registration, because there is none. If there's one thing I know about Wisconsin politics is that we should always give the benefit of the doubt to the voters. There's a very strong tradition in Wisconsin of independent voters, of not having strong partisan identity. As recently as when Governor Tommy Thompson was our governor in the 90s, he always used to say, I presume that 1/3 of Wisconsinites are Republican, 1/3 are Democrat, and 1/3 are independents, and that I, Tommy Thompson, as governor, I govern from the middle to appeal to the independents. Now, like other states, the percentage of independents has gone down, but they're still there, and I think they will determine the outcome of that congressional race.
Mary is in Emporia, Virginia, on the line for Harris supporters. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Go ahead, Mary. You're on the air.
Yes, I was just, I just want to make an opinion, right, about these political people putting God in their campaign. If they're not real, they should not put God in it. They need to leave God out of it and just do their political campaigning, because it's consequences. The Bible speaks of walls, and people are concerned about rumors of walls, but the Bible speaks of it. These people that talking political, they need to read the Bible before they put God in anything. And God is no one to be played with. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Any comment on that, Professor?
Well, it's true that we've got the Trump campaigning emphasizing religion more than the Harris campaign, and she identified herself as leaning in that direction. I think religion is a bit of a touchy subject. I don't think it's as bad as it was when John F. Kennedy was running, or back in 1928 when Al Smith was running. But it still is a touchy subject, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are plenty of Harris voters who are comfortable not talking about religion, just like there may be Trump voters who are not religiously identified, and it's fine for him to appeal to Catholics, but perhaps it doesn't have the traction with them positively or negatively as based on Mary's comment.
And here is Mike in Alexandria, Indiana, a Trump supporter. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, what year was it when they took God out of our schools? I think that was a big mistake. I think it was during the Democratic Party. I'm not sure if it was Obama that did it, but that seemed to me like was a terrible thing to do for our kids. Our kids seem to lose respect for a lot of things when that happened. I believe they need to get God back into our schools and back into the White House. And another thing I want to ask about is when is our government going to get back in order to where it don't seem like nobody is in the White House anymore. You know, in other words, I know it's during election time right now, but before election, for the last 3 years, we haven't had anybody in the White House. You know, it's empty. It's just been empty.
All right, Mike. Professor Lee.
Mike, I can't give you the exact date of when prayer in public schools stopped. It was not the Obama era. It goes back either to the 50s or 60s. I believe it was a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court when Earl Warren was the Chief Justice. And so it's more than half a century ago. Now, in my case, I went to public schools here in Wisconsin, here in Milwaukee, in the 50s. And at that point in the public school in my suburb, there was no prayer in public schools even then.
We have a question for you from Jimbo in Bakersfield, California, who says, does Professor Lee feel the same uneasiness and uncertainty about election night that many other Americans feel? I keep thinking that Trump will declare victory before all the votes have been tallied.
What I'd say to Mike is that we have to, on election night and the next morning and maybe into Thursday and Friday and Saturday, we have to try to separate ourselves from what the campaigns are saying. In other words, people who have a motivation for either claiming victory without the facts or claiming corruption without the facts, or whatever the complaint may be. We have to, in a sense, lower the volume on that. We have to up the volume on the official announcements that we're getting from the clerks and the civil servants who are in charge of counting ballots. And sometimes it goes quickly and sometimes it goes slowly. In Wisconsin, I'm very comfortable that we have nonpartisan election administration. The numbers might dribble out very, very slowly. That's in part because we have a state law that prohibits the municipal clerks from opening the absentee ballots. And by the way, in Wisconsin, an absentee ballot can either be a mailed-in ballot or it can be an early in-person voting, as is just started happening yesterday here in Wisconsin for 2 weeks. They can't touch those envelopes. They can't open those envelopes until Election Day. And so I think it's understandable that sometimes some larger municipalities would have a lag simply because of that necessity. But perhaps the most important thing to reassure viewers about the possibility of fraud is that all ballots in Wisconsin are paper. There's no more machine voting as there was back, I remember, in the city of Milwaukee back in the 60s and 70s, where you'd go behind the curtain and you'd flip a tab, and after you did all the tabs, then you'd pull it open, pull the curtain open, and the machine supposedly registered your vote. In Wisconsin, every vote is hand selected by the voters, then fed into a machine which tabulates the votes, but it doesn't eat the paper ballot. And so, for example, 4 years ago when Donald Trump paid for a recount in 2 counties in Wisconsin, they had all the paper ballots there, and in the recount, they just one by one, they counted them all with observers present. And the impact of the recounts in those 2 counties did not change who won the county, only changed sort of imperceptibly by a couple dozen votes, whether those votes went for Biden or for Trump. So I have great faith in the Wisconsin results, and I'd encourage all viewers to watch the results based on the logic of how government election administration works, not how campaigns claim the facts are.
Here's Kathy in Tomah, Wisconsin. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. I just wanted to bring up the fact that even though we are a nonpartisan registration, if you want to vote in a primary, you have to declare either a Republican or a Democrat. And in these days of Google, all you need to go into My Vote is a birth date and a name, and you can pull up, it's public record, go back 10 years how a person's voted. So you can get a really good idea. It just, you know, they say it's nonpartisan process, but it really isn't. The primary really, I don't like it. I didn't think I should have to register as one or the other. And when I discovered that in Wisconsin, I was truly disappointed.
And Kathy,
there was a lot of disappointing things going on in the last election as well.
So, Kathy, would you like to share with us how you're planning on voting?
No, I would not.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
My privacy. Thank you.
All right, Professor.
Always good to hear from a Wisconsinite. I'd like to add to what Mimi described a very important detail. And that's, as she confirmed, when you register to vote, you don't register by party. And on partisan elections, we have those in August, every Wisconsin registered voter can decide that morning if they want to vote in the Democratic primary or in the Republican primary. And they don't even declare that to the poll worker. They're handed a ballot that has one column for Democrats, one column for Republicans, and any other columns if independent and third parties have any primaries. And in the secrecy of the booth, the voter then decides, today I'm going to vote in the Democratic primary, or today I'm going to vote in the Republican primary. Nobody can link that to this person because they feed their ballot into the tabulating machine. The only restriction that perhaps Mary is hinting at is that in Wisconsin, during a partisan primary, you can only vote in one party's primary. In other words, you can't vote, let's say, in the Republican primary for, let's say, state Senate and the Democratic primary for state assembly. That is the one limitation. But nonetheless, it is nonpartisan. The only record that a citizen or a campaign can later access is who voted on primary election day, but not which party they voted in.
So just to repeat what she said about being able to Google who you voted for based on your birth date is not true.
You can Google if they voted. You can't Google if during a partisan primary day they voted for a Democrat or a Republican.
All right. And Dave C. is asking you this on X. He wants to know about the Sanders voters that voted for Trump and how big is that subset?
I'm guessing that it's relatively modest, and the reason that I think it's relatively modest is that Sanders has been in Wisconsin at least once, perhaps it's been twice, in Harris events and campaign events, and explicitly asking the people who supported him to vote for Harris. Now, are there Wisconsinites who are Sanders supporters but have decided for whatever reason to vote for Trump? I'm sure there are. Wisconsin likes mavericks, both in terms of sometimes our elected officials, certainly in terms of maverick votings. We still have people who are crossover voters. In November, in 2 weeks, some of them will vote, let's say, for a Republican for president and let's say a Democrat for U.S. Senate, or vice versa. There are fewer and fewer crossover voters, but he certainly can be right that there are some Sanders supporters who will vote for Trump on the presidential line, and then on another line for another office will vote Democratic. That's common enough in Wisconsin to still be a phenomenon, not as common as it was about 40, 50 years ago, but still enough to sway elections.
I want to ask you about the impact of the issue of abortion, and I will play for you a Harris campaign ad that features a young woman from Kenosha, Wisconsin.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. And that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Professor Lee, what do you think of that? Have you seen that that ad on your airwaves, and how impactful do you think that is?
Mimi, I've seen that ad on the airwaves here in the Milwaukee TV market. I've seen it several times. There's also a practically identical version running in the U.S. Senate race against Tim Hovde. I think that this really links back to our conversation about when Vance was appealing to a Catholic vote. Here you've got a situation where the Harris campaign is appealing to pro-choice women who otherwise are conservative on economics and would otherwise more normally vote for Trump. And that's why we've been seeing some events in typically red counties in Wisconsin. Milwaukee County is pretty overwhelmingly Democratic, and the county to the west of us, which is a suburban county called Waukesha, is very Republican and had a very strong record, for example, of supporting Governor Scott Walker. And she's trying to peel off a very specific demographic of college-educated women, some of whom are full-time homemakers, some of whom work, who are generally pro-choice, but otherwise conservative in other social values and family values. And also, there's a layer of them who, for some reason, who don't like Trump. There's, I guess, that splinter group of Republicans who have not come over to Trump. And so Harris is hoping to peel them off, and has been, through those ads and personal appearances, is explicitly calling on pro-life women, regardless of their background, to vote for her. And as far as we can tell from polling, abortion is a very powerful appeal in terms of people who are leaning Democratic, just like inflation and border security are for the Trump ticket.
Let's go to Massachusetts. A Harris supporter, Mary Jane. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to speak with the professor and have him compare the voters in his state with the voters in New England, such as Massachusetts. I feel that I don't understand how people can vote for Trump when he's already told them in all sincerity that he's going to be a dictator and that he's going to take care of the people that didn't vote for him or do whatever he wanted. And here we have Camilla coming and offering everything you would want on a silver plate. It amazes me. Do they not understand that this foul-mouthed person cannot possibly care about them? He denigrates anyone who is not white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, maybe perhaps Catholic, but he does not care about the people in general. And I'm wondering, are the people in your state, in Wisconsin, as sure of his real desires and theirs compared to Camilla's?
All right, Mary Jane. Professor?
Sure. I think the Trump political phenomenon is highly unusual and highly impressive in the sense that for all the things that Mary Jane mentioned, to some voters, that would be a turnoff, that would influence them to have a perspective like Mary Jane's. But on the other hand, he's has an influence over a category of the electorate who just absolutely love him. For reasons, there are probably half a dozen different reasons that he has these kinds of supporters. And that no matter what he says, they love him and support him. You'd have to go back in American history to a politician who had such a hold on people that it in any way is comparable to former President Trump. The closest I can get would be Franklin Roosevelt, who had just an incredible pull on voters, some voters, not all voters, and people who loved him through thick and thin. And so Donald Trump, if indeed FDR is the most recent national politician, president who had such a following that's comparable to Donald Trump, that's maybe why Mary Jane is so baffled by it, because for most of us in our lifetimes, there has never been anything like it that we've experienced personally separate from the history books in high school civics.
Let's talk to Stephen next, an undecided voter in Chatsworth, Illinois.
Yes, my nucleus family. I have one person in Wisconsin, and I'm in Illinois. And I hold a large portion of Bitcoin and gold. And I'm worried about our government seizing my gold and my Bitcoin. And that's how come I'm voting either Libertarian or for Donald Trump. I have family down in Texas that are also voting for Donald Trump. I know they are. But my son and I in Wisconsin are either voting Libertarian.
And what are you going to make that decision based on, Stephen?
Vice President Harris has...
No, I mean the decision between Libertarian and Donald Trump.
Oh, I'll probably do that at the last day.
Okay. Professor, any comment on Bitcoin and gold being seized by the government?
Stephen, as a professor of government, I would say to you what I've said to generations of students who were in my classes. There's no such thing as a wrong vote. In other words, whatever you feel is the best decision that aligns with your thinking, that's the right vote. You can't make a mistake in that respect. And it sounds like you're deliberating between voting for Trump or voting Libertarian. And there's no advice that I can give you other than to be authentic to your feelings. I think it's reasonable to say that third-party candidates like Jill Stein for the Greens that we talked about earlier in this hour and the Libertarian candidate that you're referencing, these are third parties. They're unlikely to get elected president. The number of votes cast for them might, and I want to emphasize, might influence which of the two major party candidates wins Illinois, but it might not. There are plenty of elections where there are votes for third-party candidates, and the winner of that state won so decisively that the votes for the third-party candidate, had they gotten them, would not have affected the election. It was in Wisconsin I was referring to 8 years ago, where Jill Stein might have influenced the election. So I would encourage you to do whatever feels right to you, based on the logic of whether it's close to your ideology, you're voting Libertarian, or you decide to vote for Trump because you feel that if the Libertarian can't win, that you want to help Trump win Illinois. That's those are your choices and rationales.
Professor Lee, the state of Wisconsin exported $3.8 billion in agricultural and food products in 2023. Are there concerns around the state about Trump's policies on tariffs?
Mimi, you've really nailed it. This doesn't get a lot of coverage, but for people who have driven around America, I'm sure they've seen cars with Wisconsin license plates. And I bet some of them even remember what the motto is on Wisconsin license plates, and that's America's Dairyland. In other words, that dairy farming is central to the Wisconsin agriculture and Wisconsin economics. And the thing that's bubbling below the surface is that working in a dairy is very tough work. The cows have to be milked whether you feel like it or not. And it turns out that a lot of the workers in Wisconsin dairies are migrants, some of them legal, some of them illegal. I don't think there's any credible number about the percentages, but that whether they're legal or illegal, they're willing to do those jobs, and they're glad to have those jobs based on their educational qualifications or background. And so there are a lot of Wisconsin dairy farmers who are concerned that if indeed Donald Trump wins, and if indeed he deports illegals, that they will have a major employee crisis. They won't have enough people to milk the cows. I think this is a reasonable concern. I don't know if those farmers, because of it, that's affecting who they're going to vote for. But this would be a major point. I'm not sure if it would even crash the dairy economy. That's probably putting it a little too apocalyptically, but not a lot. It's not an exaggeration to say that illegal immigrants are probably a substantial chunk of dairy workers.
Here is Frank in Byron, Georgia. Hi, Frank.
Hey, hi. I just want to say I was just listening about Wisconsin milking cows. Who milked them before? Before they all started getting the illegal immigrants. Somebody did, so they're still there. All those illegal immigrants have done is cut the salaries down, working for much less money. I was involved in Miami when they had the Cuban airlift working for the airlines, and I'm quite familiar with how bad the government can be to the taxpayer about handing out our money. And I didn't appreciate it then, and I don't appreciate it now. And all I'd like to say is I don't understand how anyone with common sense can listen to the lies that both politicians put out, because that's politics. But some of them are more verifiable than others. And let's face it, Kamala Harris's background is really conducive to being a prevaricator beyond reason. I mean, she's obviously a liar, and I don't appreciate the fact that Americans are so naive. And I wish they'd wake up to the fact that no matter what, there's a good and a bad, and we have a choice. And there's also a choice of who is the best choice, whether he's the best for this country or not. He's at least the best choice right now for our country. And I don't understand that at all, like this woman talking about abortion. I believe in God with all my heart. He's been faithful to me beyond total belief. I've been a missionary in the children's missionary field for over 50 years, really. I'm a Baptist minister, and I love the Lord, and I don't appreciate a prevaricator like Kamala Harris out there convincing people that she can.
Frank, let's get a response. Go ahead, Professor.
I'm a city boy, lived in Milwaukee all my adult life, born here. But I do know a little bit about dairy farming, not a lot. And I think it's worth trying to give an explanation to where Frank began his phone conversation. And that's, first of all, that Wisconsin has low unemployment. So in other words, we don't have a surplus of unemployed people who would likely flock to dairy farms if illegal immigrants working on dairy farms were to be deported. I think the other important fact is that Wisconsin dairy farms used to be what we'd call family farms and had relatively small herds. I don't know the precise statistics, but I'd guess the average used to be perhaps around 100 head. As the years gone by, the herds have gotten bigger and bigger, and it's not really family farming anymore, where it's the husband, the wife, and the kids, maybe a farmhand or two. But as the herds get bigger, they need more people. It's a business as much as it's farming. And that would explain why there are illegal immigrants presumably working on Wisconsin dairy farms today, and why their disappearance would unlikely be filled by other unemployed Wisconsinites.
Here's Frank in Jacksonville, Florida, a Harris supporter. Hi, Frank.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call this morning. There's an important point I want to bring out to the voters. The presidential election is very important. I'm not taking any away from that. It's very important that we go elect our president. But another thing we have to do in this election is watch our candidates running for Senate and Congress, because the Senate and Congress passes the laws, and it's the president's job to sign them into law. So just calling in and let the people be aware that president's a great vote. Yes, I encourage everybody to vote for president, but also make your choice smartly for your congressmen and your representatives, because they're the people that pass the laws in this country. I think that's one point that maybe a lot of voters aren't thinking about when they go to the polls and vote for president. That's what I wanted to say.
All right. Professor Lee.
Frank, I'm so glad you called in and said that, because there is a layer of the population who come in, they vote for president, they walk out. And whether they are pro-democratic or pro-republican, they're throwing away their votes for all the other offices. In Wisconsin, you're right, we have a big Senate race and we have at least one competitive House race. But I'd add to that I encourage voters to go all the way down the ballot to the very last name, because we have state senator, state assembly. In Wisconsin, we elect some county officers, such as sheriffs and DAs, according to partisanship. And so every single office that'll be on the ballot in 2 weeks, or whether they're voting in person now, I consider to be very important. And I hope that people will go all the way down instead of fading out, as sometimes happens.
Professor Lee, there's an article on The Hill with the headline, Senate Democrats Running Away from Harris in Blue Wall States. Of course, your state, Wisconsin, being one of those blue wall states. Have you seen that happening among the Senate Democrats? And I guess in this case, it would be Tammy Baldwin's campaign.
Mimi, you're absolutely right that when President Biden was running for re-election, that Senator Baldwin, without criticizing him, always managed to be busy whenever he came to Wisconsin to campaign. She never appeared with him. She never met him at the airport. She never was on a podium with him. She was always away. When the press would ask her, she would always avoid stating specifically why she was not endorsing President Biden and why she wasn't campaigning with him. But it's a stark contrast to ever since Harris became the nominee and President Biden withdrew from running for re-election, that Baldwin has been openly enthusiastic about supporting Harris. So I think that's indeed an example of her making some political choices.
Right, and let's talk to Betty. Arlington, Kentucky, Harris supporter. Good morning, Betty.
Good morning. I just wanted to say I've lived in all over the world and had different dictatorship and all of this, and Trump is strictly a dictator. If I live through this bit without where women are discriminated, where you can't get health, where in the world, and a preacher that can say he was for Trump when he is, the filth that's been coming out of his mouth is unbelievable. Wake up, Americans, and he's against all veterans. How can a veteran or his family be for Trump?
All right, Betty, let's get one more call in. Albert in Stockton, California, undecided voter.
Good afternoon. I'm neither Democrat or Republican. I wanted to be an independent. I would have voted for Kennedy today. I live in Stockton, California. I believe the statement is incorrect when he says some illegals, some not. Bottom line, let's all follow the rules I'm a fifth generation Hispanic, and I went to kindergarten and through high school, and we got to accept certain things. Me, I will accept Democrat or Republican. Hopefully, I live in California. Hopefully, at this point, the Republicans win. So, anyways, and like I said, I would say Kennedy. I'd vote for him.
So, Albert, since Kennedy has endorsed Donald Trump, does that mean you're going to be voting for Donald Trump?
I'll keep that confidential, most likely. But I've learned a lot from C-SPAN just in the last 4 years. So, anyways, I appreciate the gentleman. I learn more and more each day. But what I do know is you got to be legal. You got to pay taxes. I don't care who decides that, because here in California is just going. I got hot water heaters in our irrigation ditches where they're treated with, today the growers out there are treated with such great buses and bathrooms. And I'm not sure about the dairy, but I would sure like to clean up California.
All right. Professor Mordecai Lee, last comment.
last comment. I think this is a good place to end because based on how Albert described his background, it reminds us as Americans that we should never make broad generalizations about any demographic group. We should never say things like, all Hispanics are, all Catholics are. There's lots of diversity in all American populations. And for the comment about Kennedy, here in Wisconsin, Kennedy is still on the ballot. The state Supreme Court ruled a couple of weeks ago that he had filed his registration and nomination papers, and based on state law, he could not withdraw, so his name will be on the ballot. Naturally, the Trump campaign is trying to encourage people not to vote for him and reminding them that he now endorses Donald Trump. But I suspect that there will be a smidgen, maybe a percent or two that he gets, notwithstanding that, because, as I said during this discussion, Wisconsin voters are unpredictable. That's the only prediction I'll make about Wisconsin.
All right. Professor Emeritus at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Mordecai Lee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mimi.